Welcome back to my channel for part 2 of... Where did I put Empire of Storms? Here it is. She's on the ground. Empire of Storms, part 2. This is like mostly skill-based chapters, and they are some of the best chapters in the series. I have, if you've been following along with me, you know that my favorite chapter from the book is Queen of Shadows. Chapter, I don't remember, I think I have it marked in here somewhere, is the Queen of Shadow, the chapter in Queen of Shadows where Manon and Aelin encounter each other for the first time. It's gorgeous, it's spectacular, it's my favorite thing in the series. This is a close second. There is a few chapters in here. There's one chapter in particular that is my favorite, but like honestly everything that happens in Skulls Bay is a bop. It's a bop and a good time. And pretty much all we have left to cover in part 1 is Skulls Bay. There's some other stuff, obviously we have to, you know, keep tabs in Lorcan and our kids there. Aelin, Aedion, and Lysandra have yet to arrive in Skulls Bay. Rowan and Dorian are about to pull in. That's where we're actually gonna start. But we have to check on Miss Manon. So like other stuff happens, but the best of it does happen in Skulls Bay. So let's jump in because we don't need to dilly-dally. We're gonna actually start with a map. Again, we're gonna come back to this map a lot this book because they're traveling all over the place. So we have Aedion, Aelin, Lysandra all up in Ilium, so they're right on the coast. They're about to board the ship and head south to the Dead Islands. You can see Dorian and Rowan are just about to arrive at the Dead Islands down there, and then Elide and Lorcan like really haven't moved. I like truly don't know where Elide's going. She like hasn't moved far, and then Manon is back in the forest, kind of outside of Morinth, because she just left. She just left Morinth because her grandma tried to kill her. Well, she tried to kill her grandma first in her grandma's defense. So let's jump into Skulls Bay. So the boys in the boat are in Skulls Bay, and Rowan is exhausted. He's barely slept over the last few days because he literally does not trust Dorian to steer the boat for a few hours. He's like, we're gonna end up in the wide open ocean if I let Dorian steer, so apparently I have to stay awake. And Dorian and him, for the last few days that they have spent traveling, have been working on kind of honing Dorian's magic, and Dorian has been practicing making these little like snowballs in his palm as like a way of channeling his magic. It's a way to kind of let off some of the, because things can boil over also if you don't use your magic, like the top of it can boil over. So it's a way to kind of like channel that little like excess energy, also a way to practice just like control, because Dorian has like a lot of magic, but it's just kind of like flinging about. So this is a way for him to practice control. We also learned very quickly that the shipbreaker, that big chain that stretches across the harbor, is back up. A brand new watchtower has been built, but there is still some evidence of Aelin's destruction from 2 years ago, which is funny. It's a giggly little time. They get a vibe of old magic. Like, it's very clear that old magic kind of like lingers here in Skulls Bay, but there's no Valg that Rowan can sense, and he's a pretty good sensor of magic and things. So they wander into the Sea Dragon, Rolfe's personal tavern, and the tables are made out of the sterns of all the ships that Rolfe has captured, which I absolutely love. I love a theme, and I love that Rolfe loves a theme. And the theme being just like all these are actually just ships that I've captured is cute. It's cute. I kind of like, Rolfe is a fun character. He's a bop. And a barmaid comes downstairs and is like, Rolfe wondered when you'd come snooping around, like he knew that you were in town because obviously he's like in control. He's the pirate lord, so he's in control of this area. So as soon as he got word they arrived in the harbor, Rolfe found out about it. And he's waiting for them up in his office. So they go up to Rolfe's office, and Rolfe compliments Rowan's tattoos and is like, I think we're gonna get along because you have cool tattoos and I also have cool tattoos. Because Rolfe, one thing I don't think I've remembered to mention about Rolfe is Rolfe has a map tattooed onto his arms. That's magic. It like changes and shifts to like actually reflect what's going on in the world. We haven't actually seen the map working though, because it wasn't working when magic was like not here, but magic is back, and so it should be back, but he's wearing gloves, so they can't see if the tattoo is working again. But they like are suspecting that it probably is, because it seemed like the only reason it wasn't working was because magic was gone, unless he lied about it the whole time. Rolfe turns to Dorian and says, you seem remarkably calm for a king who's just been declared a traitor to his crown and robbed of a throne. And Rowan said, who said that? And Rolfe says, the messengers that arrived yesterday from Duke Parrington. He also declared your brother the crown prince and the heir. And we know very little about Holland, except that he's like a vaguely evil child. And I think we've like come to kind of like connect the fact that Dorian's dad was like possessed by the Valg when Holland was like conceived, that like perhaps like Holland has like evil in him innately. I don't know. We just know that Holland is vaguely evil. I know he's only like 11, but he's evil, okay? Just trust us on that one. And again, Dorian's thinking to himself, I wish Kale were here. He'd know what to do. He really misses his buddy. There are no Valg on the island because Rolfe has been like very diligent about killing them and getting rid of them. They've only been showing up in like small amounts. There hasn't been like a force of Valg, but occasionally a Valg guy would like wander on here and he'd be like, get rid of them. But he also knows like the potential of the Valg, because his entire crew was completely decimated in an encounter with Duke Parrington and the Valg warriors earlier this year. So Rolfe's plan moving forward, since he knows the strength of the Valg, is to mind his own beeswax and not mess with Duke Parrington. That's the plan. And he's like, I don't think they're gonna really mess with us very much. These islands won't be super helpful in terms of the war, because like it's not a great land. And Rowan says they will be if we get a fleet from the southern continent. And we have someone working on it right now, Kale. And if we have a fleet from the southern continent, this would be an important like landing point for us to use as like a harbor to help, you know, get things north. And Rolfe is like, they didn't help us 10 years ago. Why would they help us now? Speaking of the southern continent. The southern continent did not help in the initial war against Ardelayne, so he's confused why they would help moving forward. And we know that hopefully Kale's going to be able to convince them, because everyone knows Kale is very convincing. All of a sudden, more people arrive. Fenris and Gabriel from the cadre are here. Fenris is the braided, like, cutie. I feel like Fenris is, like, cute. He's got kind of, like, a more feminine vibe. And then Gabriel is the, like, ash blonde guy. He turns into a cat. Fenris turns into something else. A wolf? Rowan introduces them as former co-workers, which seems like a little bit of a mild way of being like, we were blood oaths to the same woman. But whatever. And Rowan's like, hi, why are you guys here? He's like a little worried because obviously he's not blood oathed to Maeve anymore, and they are. So like that can create some tensions. But Rolfe is like, they're here for lunch, obviously. I figured we'd get the whole gang back together and have a little kiki. And so they go downstairs and they have lunch with the Blondie boys and Dorian. Look at all these blondes. Maeve has a thing for blondes. And Gabriel is like, is Aelin Galathynius with you? And Rowan is like, no, my queen isn't here. He's sad. He misses his girl Aelin. And Gabriel is like, Maeve's armadas sail for this continent, for the continent. And Rowan is like, is she going to ally with Erewhon? And Gabriel is like, no, she doesn't want any part in the war. She's going to Elwë. And Rowan's like, why? And Gabriel's like, we don't know. She's become much sneakier since you left. Since I think she realized that the cadre could betray her and turn against her, she's been a little bit more hesitant to share information with us. And Rowan's like, I need to send a message to Aelin immediately that Maeve has ships going down to Elwë. And Rolfe is like, why? Won't she be here soon? I've heard what she's been up to lately, and I don't think she would send Dorian here if she wasn't coming to pick him up later. Does she expect a parade when she arrives? Because we won't be throwing one. And Rowan is like, she's not coming here. We were actually just about to leave. Dorian came to ask for your help, but since you're being a big, stinky, mean jerk about it, we'll go. But I want to warn you that even if the Valg let you keep your islands, who will you trade with? They will lock you out of all the rivers and water. And Rolfe is like, you are being so annoying, go away. You can stay till Aelin arrives. I'm not fooled by your little tricks and your little games. I'm sure she'll be here soon, but then I want you to get out of here, okay? A reminder that Rolfe has no idea that Aelin and Celaena are the same person. Oh, he doesn't know yet. So they go to this inn, and Rowan gets like 2 rooms. He gets a room for him and then a room for Dorian. And he's like, oh my gosh, Aelin's gonna arrive here, and then Aelin and I are gonna share this little hotel room. He's very excited about it. He's excitable. And they order room service, and a bunch of the boys head up to Rowan's room, and they all sit down and they eat a little snackety snack and chit chat. And Rowan turns to Fenris and Gabriel, and he's like, hey, how did your guys' scents stay hidden? I didn't smell you when you got into town, and I should have. And Gabriel is like, oh, Maeve has gathered some new tricks. She's up to some shenanigans. And Fenris is like, who's paying for this hotel room? This whole war? And Rowan is like, that's literally none of your business. And then Rowan asks, where is Connell, Fenris's twin? Fenris says, Maeve always keeps one of us as collateral. And we learn that Fenris really reluctantly took the blood oath. I think a lot of them are not, like, obviously Rowan wasn't like super excited about his blood oath by the time he left, but I think we come to find that particularly like, well, Fenris in this example probably likes his blood oath the least, but Gabriel doesn't seem enthused about it, and he only took the blood oath to keep his brother safe. So Connell had taken the blood oath first, and Fenris took it in order to keep his brother safe and to keep them together. And then Gabriel asks Rowan, where's Lorcan? And Rowan's like, I don't know. Why are you asking me? And Gabriel's like, Maeve sent us to hunt Lorcan down. That's actually why we're here. We're supposed to kill him. So, and Rowan is like, okay, I guess that sort of makes sense. He did kind of go rogue. And Fenris is like, yeah, Vaughn is headed north to do the same thing. So let's go through the cadre members. So we have Rowan, who is now bloodsworn to Aelin instead. We have Lorcan, who's hanging out with Elide, trying to gather the word keys. Maeve doesn't like it. She's going to try to kill him. Then we have Fenris and Connell. So Fenris hates being blood oathed. He is bebopping down here in Skulls Bay, along with Gabriel. And then Fenris's twin brother Connell is back with Maeve in Wendelin. And then we have Vaughn. And Vaughn is up north looking for Lorcan as well. And that's where everyone is, okay? That's the 411. And Rowan is like, I don't work for Maeve anymore, so I don't need to tell you where Lorcan is. And he wants to make sure to kind of, he like isn't gonna help them, not because he has any allegiance to Lorcan. He like does not care if Lorcan lives or dies, but he knows that Lorcan is looking for the word keys, and he doesn't want to lead these guys to Lorcan if Lorcan has gathered a word key, because he wants to keep the word keys away from Maeve. Okay, great. And Gabrielle is like, okay, maybe we can make a bargain. We can like do a little tradesy. And Rowan says, sure, I would love to do a trade. You send me an army of Dornell's warriors, and I'll tell you where Lorcan is and where he plans to go. You could make me an alliance, and there we go. And Fenris is like, be reasonable. You think Maeve is going to let us send you a bunch of warriors? And Rowan says, okay, fair enough. I'll settle for both of you then. And Fenris is like, fighting battles for your queen? And Rowan says, yeah, I think this could actually be a loophole in fulfilling your bargain to Maeve, because Maeve has sworn that you will do whatever it takes to go after Lorcan and make sure he gets killed. So if whatever he takes is actually helping me and Aelin in the battle, and knowing that I will then give you information on Lorcan, you're still fulfilling what you need to be doing, but you're also helping us. And Fenris is like, well, by the time we finish this whole war, you're not going to have any idea where Lorcan is. And Rowan is like, yeah, but eventually Lorcan is going to end up with Aelin. Like, Lorcan is going to figure out he has a fake word key, he's going to need another word key, like, he's going to either end up, he's going to need Aelin for some reason. If you join our fight, you'll be right with our queen, my queen, soon to be your queen, when that does happen. And Fenris is like, that is if we survive. And what of Brandon's gifts? How long will a single flame last against the darkness that gathers? Maeve hid her motives about the Armada and Elwë, but at least she told us who really reigns in Morianth. And then Rowan says in response, 10 years ago, we did nothing to stop this. If Maeve had set a force, we might have kept it from growing so out of control. Our brethren were hunted and killed and tortured. Maeve let it happen for spite, because of Aelin's mother would not yield to her wishes. So yes, my Fireheart is one flame in the sea of darkness, but she is willing to fight Fenris. She is willing to take on Erewhon, to take on Maeve and the gods themselves, if it means peace can be had. But Aelin is one person, Rowan went on, and even her gifts might not be enough to win. Alone, he breathed, meeting Fenris's stares, then Gabrielle's. She will die, and once that flame goes out, it is done. There is no second chance. Once that fire extinguishes, we are all doomed, in every land, in every world. And Rowan's heart hurts, even thinking about Aelin dying. Like, it breaks his little hawk heart. But the boys aren't convinced entirely, because even if they use this loophole, Maeve will almost certainly punish them once they find out what she's doing, what they're up to. And so Rowan plays his final card. Also, Dorian is here this whole time, and he's just vibing. Like, he literally is not uninvolved in this conversation, so I gave him some popcorn, because he's just watching from the back row. So Rowan says, if you do not fight in this war, Gabrielle, then you doom your son to die. And Gabrielle says, bullshit, like, what are you talking about? Rowan continues, he is coming. You might want to wait to make your decision until you meet him. And Gabrielle goes, I have a son. And Rowan says, stay out of our way until they arrive. And then he says to Fenris and Gabrielle, and he says, if you so much as hint about Gabrielle's son to Maeve, our bargain is over. You will never find Lorcan. If Lorcan does show up, I'll gladly help him to kill you. Rowan prayed it wouldn't come to that, to a fight that brutal and devastating. And so he's like, he knows that Gabrielle will be very, like, interested in the news that he has a son, and Aedion is his son, and will at least stick around to see Aelin. And he knows that Aelin is a convincing little lady. Speaking of Aelin, her, Aedion, and Lysandra are vibing on a boat. The nice thing about Lysandra being a shapeshifter, one of the nice things, there's a lot of nice things, is that they only have to buy 2 tickets for the 2 people, and then she just comes on as a hawk and turns into a person when she needs to. But Aelin is, like, very anxious to get to Dorian and Rowan, especially after the conversations with the Overseer, because she just, like, worries about Rowan, her beloved. And Aedion is like, honestly, it's kind of weird that the king never put a collar on me. Like, they gave me a ring, but, like, they never really did much with it. And Aelin is like, I don't know. He mostly just left Dorian alone as well. Maybe he knew I would come for you eventually, or maybe, like, there was some part of the king that, like, was able to, like, kind of divert his power. And Aedion cannot stop thinking about Aelin's time in Endover after seeing the Overseer and realizes that there had been many times where he had camped just outside of Endover's gates, that he had been within hundreds of feet of Aelin. Not, like, super close, but close enough where, like, he could have done something, but he didn't help her, obviously, because he didn't know she was there. And Aelin is like, we are not starting down this road. Erewhon sent that man for a reason. For this reason. He knows my past. He wants me to know he's aware of it, and he will use it against us. He'll use everyone we know if he needs to. Like, calm down. But Aelin also brings up something, because when they were talking with Darrow mentioned that Aedion actually fought in the battle, the initial battle between like Ardelane and Terrasen, and she asked Aedion about it because he would have only been 14 at the time, and Aedion is like, yeah, I was only 14, and Aelin is like, I'm sorry you had to endure that. Therilus is the battlefield I see the most in my dreams. Darrow made sure I stayed out of the thick of it, but we were overwhelmed. It was unavoidable. And Aelin says again, I'm sorry. Aedion continues, my life as a warrior was chosen long before that battlefield. And Aelin says, I don't blame Darrow for blocking me from Terrasen. I would do the same, judge the same if I were him. She's like, objectively, like looking at me, I would not be like, yeah, come on in, be the queen of my territory. You're 19 and we haven't seen you in a decade. And you've been running around working for the king. Like, she is like, I would be wary. Like, there's part of her, even though she's annoyed as heck because he's rude, that like respects Darrow's judgment of her. Aedion says, I thought you were gonna fight him. And Aelin is like, I am gonna fight him. Like, just because I agree that like he shouldn't judge me so harshly doesn't mean I'm gonna like give in to his ruling, but I understood why he did that. So that's the check-in on the boat journey. Then they're gonna go do some scheming because Aelin loves to scheme on a boat. Let's go check on Miss Manon and Mr. Abraxas. So Manon wakes up and she is in the Oakwald Forest somewhere. They're in a little clearing because remember Abraxas is a big boy and so he needs to be somewhere where he can fit. And she's still bleeding quite a bit, but grandmother's nails weren't poisoned, they were just like jagged and rusty, so she's not dying quickly. She's just like maybe bleeding out a little bit. And she passes out again like shortly after coming to and like wakes up hours later, and Abraxas is wrapped around her, like has his wings around her and is snuggled up and trying to keep her warm. And she knows she needs to get to water, and she can hear water, but she can't get to it with like from where she's at. It's like through like a pretty tight like cluster of trees, and Abraxas can't fit. He's too big. But she asks Abraxas for help, and he literally picks her up with his mouth and steadies her so she can reach the stream. It's like so sweet. It makes me want to die. It's so sweet. Powerful jaws closed around the collar of her tunic, hoisting her up with such gentleness. Manon's chest tightened. He's a literal angel. We do not deserve this boy. He's so good. But he can't like help her through the trees, so she has to kind of like stagger to the trees, through those trees herself to get to the creek. And then she kind of like collapses and she's like drinking out of the creek when this scary redhead woman shows up and she's like, hello, I am the Dark Lord's Bloodhound. And Manon is like, literally never heard of you. I was in Morinth for a long time and he never even mentioned you. And the Bloodhound says, you would not have heard of me until your treachery. I was kept beneath those other mountains, but when he honed the power within my own blood, those blue eyes pierced Manon and it was madness that glittered there. He could do so much with you, Blackbeak, so much. He sent me to bring his crowned rider to his side once more. Manon is crazy injured and she cannot run away and she cannot fight, but she is looking at the Bloodhound, and the more she looks at the Bloodhound, the more Manon is like, oh my gosh, she is scary. She's giving her uncanny, creepy vibes, and she has like scary, she like smiles at Manon, and Manon realizes she has like scary black, like stumpy teeth. Scary, frightening, yucky. The Bloodhound like comes for Manon, and Manon's able to like scoot herself between two trees, and the Bloodhound kind of like gets stuck, like lodges herself in between them, and Manon like thanks the mother, like this should not have worked, and Manon's able to get up and run away sobbing because her guts are literally spilling out of her insides, okay? And she makes it to Abraxas, and he immediately takes off, but the Bloodhound is like right behind them, and she is like approaching, and Abraxas is able to knock her back down to the forest floor, and they take off. And the Bloodhound shouts, I will find you, from where she's laying on the forest floor. And Manon tells Abraxas to fly to the coast and go find somewhere safe. And then she passes out again. Back in Skulls Bay with Dorian and Rowan, it's been 2 weeks that they've been here in Skulls Bay waiting for Aelin to show up, and Dorian and Rowan have been practicing magic every day. And Dorian's been having like a tough time. Rowan is a tough trainer. Like it is not an easy breezy time that Dorian has been having with Rowan. And sometimes Fenris and Gavriel come too, but Rowan makes them leave when Dorian is having like a sad day, and it's really sweet. At first Dorian can't like figure out why sometimes Fenris and Gavriel are allowed and sometimes Rowan doesn't like let them come, and Dorian realizes on the days where he is like really steeped in those nightmares of like Sorsha and the Wordstone Caller, Rowan makes sure that Dorian can be alone. It's very sweet. And Dorian thinks to himself, honestly he had no idea how Aelin had survived months of this, let alone fallen in love with the warrior while she did, though he supposed both the queen and the prince possessed a sadistic streak that made them compatible. They're also getting news from Rifthold while all of this is happening, and it isn't great. The witches are in charge and the city is in ruins. The rich have just like fled, as they do, and the poor are just like being forced to survive in this hellscape that is the city. Great. Ardelane's ships have all been positioned along Elway's northern coast, so all these ships are going to Elway in a very suspicious move, and every night, like, Dorian and Rowan kind of like go out and try to gather more information, and then they meet back in the hotel room and they like chit chat about it. And Dorian's got a new bestie. He likes to have someone to like plan with. He does not like going off and doing things by himself. Where Aelin like thrives in like completing a scheme alone, Dorian thrives when he has some friends. He's an extrovert, okay? But there has been no news on Prince Holland and Queen Georgina. We just like assume that they're still in the mountains vibing. And then one day, Dorian is like, you know what? I have a little scheme. We love that baby Dorian got a scheme. What if I'm like very sick and tired of having to wait for Rolfe to say that we can come like chat with him about our plans. Give me some paper, Rowan. Give me some paper and I will get us into that place. And then 3 hours later, the whole crew gets summoned to the sea dragon. And Dorian puts a shield around the boys. Like they've been practicing. He's doing so good with his magic. And Dorian's little scheme worked. Essentially, he sent a letter to himself and it arrived in Dorian's room. And Dorian pretended to be like shocked when he read it. And Rolfe's spies, he like made sure he was in sight of Rolfe's spies, and they were obviously convinced by the dramatics and by this little like show of like receiving information that like really changes everything. And so they all go up to Rolfe's office, and who should be sitting at his desk but, okay, take a moment to pause. We always take a moment to pause before we enter into an excellent, superb, beautiful scene. So if chapter 60 from Queen of Shadow is going to be read at my funeral, I would like this next scene to be like a full back tattoo on myself. I love this scene so much. It's so great. It doesn't speak to who I am as a core, in the core of who I am in the same way that chapter 60 from Queen of Shadows does, but it does like release a lot of joy within me. Who should be waiting at his desk but Miss Celaena Sardothien. Back in her fighting leathers. I know she doesn't change for our purposes, but like she's back in her Celaena Sardothien outfit. She's got the assassin swagger on. She's got her feet up on his desk. Just like last time when she arrived in Skull's Bay, this is like how she entered the scene as well. And Rolfe says to her the moment he catches her, he says, I have a distinct memory, Celaena Sardothien, of saying that if you set foot in my territory again, your life was forfeit. Ah, Aelin said, lowering her hands but leaving her feet still propped up on Rolfe's desk. But where would the fun in that be? And Aelin says to Dorian, Hi, Majesty. And Dorian says, Hello, Celaena. Because it was Celaena who sat here. For whatever purpose, it was Celaena Sardothien in that room. Dorian, again, he's playing along. He says, okay, if Celaena's here, I don't know why she's here instead of Aelin, but happy to play along. And Celaena says, I like this office better than your last one, Rolfe. Because she did maybe ruin his last office a little bit. And Aelin continues to Rolfe, You've seen better days, but considering half your fleet has abandoned you, I say you would look decent enough. And Rolfe is like, get out of my chair! And Aelin does not move from his chair and instead turns to Rowan with a secret smile and says, You? I don't know, but I'd like to. Rowan's lips tugged upward. I'm not on the market, unfortunately. Aelin starts playing with a bowl of emeralds that are on the table, like on the desk in front of her. She's just like plunking them around. And she says, Pity. She must be a rare, staggering beauty to make you so faithful. She must be clever and fascinating and very, very talented. Plunk, plunk, plunk went the emeralds. She examined the 4 gems remaining in her hand. She must be the most wonderful person who ever existed. Rowan says in response, She is indeed that, and more. Just like, And Rolfe says, What are you doing here? Why are you flirting with this fake prince? What the heck is going on? And Aelin is like, Is that any way to speak to an old friend? And Rolfe is like, Last I heard your master was dead and you sold the guild to his underlings. You're a free woman. What are you doing in my city? Leave me alone. And Aelin met his sea green eyes with an irreverence that Dorian wondered if she had been born with or had honed through skill and blood and adventure. War is coming, Rolfe. Am I not allowed to weigh my options? I thought to see what you plan to do. And then Rolfe turns to Dorian and is like, Can you please deal with her? She's your champion. I heard you were the one who went and got her out of Endover. Could you please, like, deal with her? And Dorian says to Rolfe, You will find, Rolfe, that one does not deal with Celaena Sardothien. One survives her. Hold for applause. Sorry, Dorian, that's a gorgeous little line. And Rolfe's like, okay, so what's the plan then? You made a bargain to get out of Endover to become the king's champion, and now that he is dead, you wish to see how you might profit? And Aelin is like, yeah, you know how my tastes run. Even with Erebin's fortune and the sale of the guild, war can be profitable at times for people who are smart with their business. And Rolfe is like, this is not the told who I knew. Where is that 16-year-old self-righteous brat who wrecked 6 of my ships, stole 2 of them, and destroyed my town, all for the sake of 200 slaves? A shadow flickered in Aelin's eyes that sent a chill down Dorian's spine. Spend a year and end over, Rolfe, and you'll quickly learn how to play a different sort of game. I told you, Rolfe seethed with that quiet venom, that you would one day pay the price for that arrogance. Aelin's smile became lethal. Indeed, I did. And so did Arobynn Hamel. Again, we're holding for applause, holding for applause. Okay, we can continue. Rolfe blinked just once, then straightened. Get out of my seat and put back that emerald you slipped up your sleeve. Good. At least your eyesight isn't failing you in your old age. And the other one, Rolfe said through clenched teeth. Aelin grinned again and then leaned back in Rolfe's chair, tipped up her head and spat out an emerald she had somehow kept hidden under her tongue. Dorian watched the gem arc neatly through the air. And Aelin goes, have you been involved with slave trading? And Rolfe goes, no. And she says, and you've been provided sanctuary for escaped slaves here? And Rolfe says, we haven't gone out of our way, but if they arrive on our shores, yes. Aelin's like, I know you weren't lying because I verified that before I showed up today. And I looked through your papers before you returned to your office. I know that you're telling me the truth. And Rolfe was like, do you know how much your little stunt cost me? And Aelin, like, had seen some papers in her digging and realized, yeah, it cost, like, quite a lot. But then Rolfe turns to Rowan, Fenris, and Gabriel, and he says, you want my assistance in this war? Here's the cost. Kill her. Now. Then my ships and men are yours. Easy, breezy, beautiful, clever girl. And Aelin is like, they won't. And Rolfe says, these guys are Fae warriors. You might find your little assassin skills don't quite stand up to them. And Aelin is like, you may want to sit down for what comes next. And Rolfe is like, get out of my chair then. I will sit down when I have a chair to sit in. He doesn't get to finish because just then someone strolls in the door. Allow me to introduce you, Captain Rolfe, to the incomparable, the beautiful, and the absolutely all-around flawless Queen of Terrasen. Who should stroll in but Aelin Galathynius? And Dorian is confused because he knows that Celaena and Aelin are the same person. And right now we got twin girlies standing in front of us. Aelin and Aelin looked at each other. The one in black grinned up at the newcomer. You are gorgeous, aren't you? The one in green smiled. But for all its delight, all its wicked mischief, it was a softer smile, made with a mouth that was perhaps less used to snarling and teeth-baring, and getting its way with saying some hideous, swaggering things. Lysandra, then. The two queens faced Rolfe. Rolfe's freaking out because he knows that Aelin Galathynius didn't have a twin. And so he's like, what the heck is happening here? What is going on? And Aelin is like, Rolfe, you're ruining all my fun. Of course I didn't have a twin. And then Lysandra's shape shifts back to herself. And she says, as intrigued as I am to see that the cadre is present, Aelin said, will you verify to his pirateness that I am who I say I am, and we can move on to other pressing matters. Rolfe's face was white with fury as they realized they'd all known who truly sat before them. Dorian said, she is Aelin Galathynius and Celaena Sardothien. But it was to Fenris and Gabriel, the outside party, that Rolfe turned. Gabriel nodded, and Fenris's eyes now fixed on the queen. She is who she says she is. So, Rolfe, the queen drawled, tossing the tube from hand to hand, let's discuss this little business of you refusing to aid my cause. And then they all go sit in a big conference table at Rolfe's office, and Rowan and Aelin reunite with just like an elbow touch. It is very like sweet. They clearly missed each other over the weeks they've spent apart and were worried about each other. And Rowan gives her a little update on why the cadre are there, and also an update about Ardaleine's fleets and where they are. And he says to her, I missed you like hell. And this is a really big deal because last time they were separated, he lectured her for missing him. Aelin was like, I missed you. And Rowan was like, don't miss people. Like, people are just a weakness. And now he's like come to like realize he's like okay with that to some extent. And he recognizes there's like no denying the fact that Aelin is his weakness. She is his weak spot in many ways. She smiled despite what she had told her, pulling back to look at him, untouched, unharmed. It was more than she could have hoped for. Even with the news he'd delivered, Aelin decided she didn't particularly give a shit who was watching, and rose up on her toes to brush her mouth against his. It had taken all of her wits and abilities to avoid leaving trace of her scent today for him to detect, and the shocked delight on his face had been utterly worth it. Rowan's hand on her arm tightened as she pulled away. The feeling, Prince, she murmured, is mutual. And Rolfe is giving them a stink eye the whole time. He's like, what the frickety frick is happening? And Aelin is like, get over it. You hate me, I hate you. We both hate being told what to do by busybody overlording empires. What a perfect pairing, Rolfe spat. You nearly wrecked everything I worked for. Your silver tongue and arrogance won't get you through this. And they go back and forth and like banter back and forth for a bit. And Aelin is like, what if I made you the pirate king? And Rolfe is like, by what authority? And Dorian's like, by the authority of like the support of two major kingdoms, Ardalain and Terrasen. We're both here in this realm. And Rolfe lets out a laugh. The talk of young idealists and dreamers. The world, Aelin said, will be saved and remade by the dreamers, Rolfe. The world will be saved by the warriors, by the men and women who will spill their blood for it, not for empty promises and gilded dreams. Aelin lay her hands flat on the table. Perhaps, but if we win this war, it will be a new world, a free world. That is my promise to you. To anyone who will march under my banner, a better world, and you will have to decide where your place in it shall be. And Rolfe is like, there is nothing that you can give me that I can't give myself. I'm like, a very capable young man. Aelin is like, okay, what do you want then? And Rolfe says, the only thing that could possibly tempt me is your hand. If I married you and became the king of Terrasen, this is a rude thing to imply. Stop trying to marry Aelin. She's gonna marry Rowan, obviously. Don't be weird. Everyone brushes that kind of aside. No one takes that very seriously. And then Rolfe turns to Dorian and asks what news he received to like elicit this whole meeting, this whole reaction. And Rowan cuts in, nothing, it was a trick, you loser, you dummy, haha, sucker. Because now Rowan's in a bad mood because, again, don't stand in the way of Rowan marrying our girl Aelin. And Rolfe is like, you guys are the worst, you're so annoying and mean to me. You have 2 days to get out of here before I'm gonna kill you all. Aelin leaves for the moment, but she's like, I know I'll be back to chit chat with this man again. As soon as they get in the hallway, Gabriel is like, where is he? Where is my son? And Rowan steps between them, and Aelin is like, you don't get to decide when you will meet him. Like, this is not on you, this is up to your son to decide. And Gabriel says, he's my God's damned son. I think I get to decide what to do. And Aelin shrugged, you don't even get to decide if you were allowed to call him that. Before you start being like, my son, let's have a chit chat with him. Those tawny eyes flashed, the tattoo's hands curled into fists, but Rowan said, Gabriel, she does not intend to keep you from him. Like, her goal is not to keep you guys apart, but to let Aedion kind of like control the situation. And Gabriel is like, tell me where my son is now. And Lysandra turns into something to go like warn Aedion to like, you know, go hide away. Aelin turns to Gabriel and says, hell if I know. Also, don't give me orders. You are not in charge here, sir. And so they kind of like separate. They go to meet with Lysandra and Aedion in the courtyard of their hotel. And Dorian and Aelin kind of hang back while everyone else goes on ahead. And Aelin is like, I'm so sorry about what happened in Rifthold. And the king's face tightened. And he says, well, thank you for the help. Like, thank you for providing what you did. And Aelin shrugged. Rowan's always looking for an excuse to show off. Dramatic rescues give him purpose and fulfillment in his dull, immortal life. Anyway, they all go up to Rowan's hotel room and they're chit-chatting. And they everyone gives a recap. Aelin gives a recap of what happened at the temple, and Rowan and Dorian give a recap of what's been happening here at the Close Bay. And Aedion, and back in Rifthold. And Aedion goes, Manon would be a good ally. And Aelin is like, maybe we can get them to turn on each other so we don't have to deal with them, because the witches do seem like they're going to be a problem. So if the witches have some infighting going on, that is for our benefit. And Aelin knows that she needs to secure Rolfe's alliance and also wants to use his magical arm map to help find the lock. There's like dual purposes for why they're here. That night, Aedion and Lysandra are walking through Skull's Bay together, and she's wearing the amulet of Orinth because Aelin is worried that Rolfe is going to try to go after it. And we kind of learn that the bigger the animal is that Lysandra shifts into, the more taxing it is of an experience. Like, shifting into little birds is like pretty easy breezy. She could do it all day long. But shifting into bigger creatures, it's harder to make like the shift, like the transition from like mortal to animal and back and forth. The bigger the creature is, the harder that like transition is. It doesn't take any effort to like hold the shape. And then they start talking about Aedion meeting his father. Aedion is like wondering if it's going to help their cause. Gabriel would be more inclined to support them if Aedion talks with him. And Lysandra's like, you can't do it for the cause. Like, this needs to be something that you do for you. And he's like, okay, will you come with me when I go meet my father? And Lysandra's like, yeah, of course. And then one of Rolfe's barmaids comes wandering down, and they are in this back alley, though it's not like a throughway. The only reason someone would come down here is if they were specifically coming to like look for them. And it's unclear if she's like planning on stealing something or if she's just doing some recon, but like clearly she's onto them, and they are like suspicious. Let's go check on Mr. Lorcan and Miss Elide. They've been traveling with the circus for 2 weeks now. Elide is very tired of it. It's been quite slow going this time around because it's been so muddy that the carts like cannot get through the mud very quickly. Lorcan's been using the time though to get more information about Morinth whenever they get like a moment apart from the crowd. They often like escape away and pretend to be like newlyweds that need like a moment to themselves, but really Lorcan is just questioning her about Morinth. They're off gathering firewood when Lorcan asks her to describe the dungeons, which is like the last bit of Morinth she hasn't described yet. And she like is reluctant to on 2 counts. One, it's just like, it makes her feel yucky recalling those dungeons, and because she had such a horrible traumatic experience in them. Also, she knows when she's done with the description of the dungeons, Lorcan's gonna leave. So she kind of refuses to tell him. And Lorcan is like, we had a deal. And Elide's like, so kill me. And he feels like something ripple. The word stone, because Elide has been carrying it for so long, it really reacts to her emotions and kind of like seems to like be a little bit magic, even though she doesn't have magic herself. And Lorcan doesn't know what he's sensing when he knows he's sensing something. And Lorcan is like, what are you? And Elide is like, I am nothing. Oh, it makes me so sad. We get a lot of like Elide's internal stuff over the next few like Elide Lorcan chapters, and she like really struggles with this idea that she will be at all useful to Aelin, but she like is willing to try. Like she's willing to try anything, but she kind of feels like she's just like a waste of everything. Oh. And Lorcan asks her, why do you go to Aedon Galathynius? And Elide says, you know the queen. She's like finally caught on that Lorcan does know what the heck he's talking about. And Lorcan gives her a little bit, gives her a little info as a treat. Celaena Sardothien is in the queen's service, he says. Okay, close. You'll find your two paths are one. Find one and you will find the other. And Elide realizes this is like a trade. He's trying to trade her for information. And she realizes that like everything in her life is a trade. Like nothing is selfless. No one has ever really cared for her and done stuff for her just for like her good. And she says maybe the witches, but like even it had been such a short-term relationship between her and Manon, and they like had just like left her in the woods. It feels very sad. And Lorcan is like, you will tell me what you know once you are better. And Elide is like confused because she's not ill at all. She's like, better for what? And she realizes that Lorcan is talking about like the despair he can sense on her. There's like the sense of hopelessness that kind of like rolls over her. And Lorcan is like, when you are feeling a little less depressed and a little less sad with yourself, you're gonna tell me everything you know. And Elide is like, he must think that like despair is a sickness. And Lorcan is meanwhile thinking like, no, actually, like if someone is like truly despair, they have this like hopelessness, they don't have any joy, any foresight for the future, torture doesn't work super well on them. And so he's gonna wait until she's in a slightly better headspace, because if he's gonna torture her, he wants to make sure it's gonna work and it's gonna be effective. So they go back to the camp and they get good news. They finally get to share a tent. They've been thus far avoided sleeping next to each other because the girlies will sleep in the wagons and the boys will kind of like take turns sleeping on the ground, and Lorcan is always happy to volunteer to sleep on the ground. So him and Elide don't have to pretend to be married and like snuggle up next to each other. But tonight they get their own tent and they're like, yay, we get a tent. And they get inside and Lorcan's like, I'm gonna sleep on the floor. You can sleep in the bed. And Elide is like, okay. This is a one bed situation in which Elide makes the right move. The boy volunteers to sleep on the floor and then she goes, great, that sounds like a plan, Stan. Elide is a little bit like, what if someone comes in? They're gonna see that you're sleeping on the floor and it's gonna be a little weird. And Lorcan's like, well, just say we had a fight. And Elide is like, every single night? What if someone comes in again later? And Lorcan's like, okay. But then eventually she's like, okay, whatever. Lorcan is like, I'll pay them money so that you can get your clothes washed. I have no other clothes. Like, I will be naked. So. And Lorcan's like, yeah, but we gotta wash these clothes. And we'll take turns. It'll be okay. And Elide's like, wouldn't it make more sense that since we're a young married couple that we get our clothes washed at the same time? And Lorcan's like, I will wait. You are very, very young. He says carefully. And I am very, very old. He says, we will not be naked in the same space. No, thank you. Elide is like, no, but you also need to take a bath and wash your clothes because you stink. So either you need to wash your clothes or you're going to sleep outside tonight. And this is just a test. Elide like really doesn't actually care if she washes his clothes, but Elide has like slowly been grasping more power from this man. She wants to know if she's the boss of him. And she is, because Lorcan goes, okay. So Lorcan returns back to the tent. Elide is inside. Lorcan comes back with like water so they can take a bath or take a, like, you know, not a real bath, but like a quick scrub down. They can bathe. And Elide is like sitting on the bed, like rubbing her mangled ankle. And Lorcan turns and asks her, how badly does it hurt every day? He sometimes used his magic to brace the ankle when he remembered, which wasn't often. And Elide says, I've had it since I was a child. I've learned to live with it. And then Lorcan goes, that's not an answer. And Elide is like, why do you even care? And then Lorcan goes outside so Elide can wash. And he's listening to her while she like washes, obviously, just like keeping an eye on her, and he hears her hide something in the mattress. It's the word key, we know. And he starts thinking about Rowan and Aelin and thinking about how much Aelin changed Rowan. Love had ruined Rowan's ability to be a good commander. He was like, that's such a shame that Rowan like got a girlfriend and now he's so bad at like being ruthless. But Elide passes him her clothes through the door and asks him to get them washed. He ends up washing them himself though, because the guy that like was gonna wash the clothes is like busy cooking. He just washes them himself and he brings them back clean along with a bowl of soup for Elide. Elide is sitting there just like wrapped in a blanket and her legs are out and bare, and he's truly transfixed by her legs. He's like, she has such stunning legs. Anyway, he goes, Umbria was busy, so I washed the clothes myself. She flushed. A body is a body. he repeated to her simply. So are undergarments. I got you dinner since I assumed you didn't want to sit among everyone in your blanket. He dumped the pile of clothes on her bedroll, and I got you more clothes from Molly. She's charging you, of course, but at least you won't have to sleep naked. She didn't say thank you, she just started eating, and then she said, my uncle, he is a commander at Morinth. But Marion continued between bites. He locked me in the dungeon once. Lorcan's magic sweeps the cave at this because he's upset, obviously, that his little nugget got locked in a dungeon. But Elide doesn't pause. His name is Vernon, and he is clever and cruel, and he will likely try to keep you alive if you are caught. He wields people to gain power for himself. He has no mercy, no soul. There is no moral code that guides him. And Lorcan's like, do you want me to kill him for you when I go to Morinth? Her limpid, dark eyes rose to his face, and for a moment he could see the woman she'd become, was already becoming. Someone who, regardless of where she'd been born, any queen would prize at her side. Would there be a cost? Lorcan hid his smile. Smart, cunning little witch. No, he said, and meant it. Why did he lock you in the dungeons? And Elide answers, because he wished to see if his bloodline could be crossed with the Valg. That is why I was brought to Morinth, to be bred like a prized mare. Every thought emptied out of Lorcan's head. He had seen and dealt and endured many unspeakable things, but this. Did he succeed? He managed to ask. Elide vaguely explains the situation with the yellow legs and the explosion and how, no, she was able to get out in time, but won't give any details because she doesn't want to endanger the 13. Like, if Lorcan does make it to Morinth or winds up exchanging, she just, would never give out any information that would put the witches at risk. She loves them. And then Lorcan asked her, your foot has been ruined for years, though. He locked you in the dungeon for that long? No, she said, not even flinching at his rough description. I was only in the dungeon for a week. The ankle, the chain, he did that to me long before. What chain? She blinked. And he knew she'd meant to avoid telling him that one particular detail. But now that he looked, he could make out among the massive scars a white band. And there, around her perfect other ankle, was its twin. A wind laced with dust and coldness of a tomb gnawed through the field. Marion merely said, when you kill my uncle, ask him yourself. I love Elide so much. Back in Skulls Bay, Rowan and Aelin are finally alone for a moment, and they're chatting, and they know the map works because Lysandra, that was a test. The Lysandra had Aedion in the alley with a test. They were testing to see if the map worked, if it would pick up on the word key, and clearly it did because Rolfe sent someone directly there to look at them. And it looks like they suspect it probably looks like a Valg on Rolfe's map, that it shows up as like a Valg, and so that barmaid showed up and was probably confused. And they boop out the window, over the river and through the woods, to Gabrielle and Fenris's room to check in on them. They literally jump in through the window, and Fenris is like, you could have literally used the door. And Aelin's like, that is no fun. How was your summer with my sweet Aunt Maeve? And Gabrielle's like, you aren't letting me see my son, and you expect me to give you information about my blood-sworn queen? And Aelin is like, I did not deny you anything, kitty cat. Ugh. I love when Aelin has her assassin little charm and swagger on. And they start talking about this idea of the settling, which is this idea of where demi-fae and fae will have this point in which their aging kind of stops and immortality sets in. And it happens for different species and different creatures at different times. And they're wondering if it's going to happen to Aelin because she does have some fae in her fae blood in her lineage, but she is demi-fae. So it's kind of hit or miss whether she'll be immortal or not. And that's kind of a weird situation because she is dating an immortal man. And so they have some conversation around that. But Rowan and Aelin are not too keen to talk about that aspect of the relationship. And so then they move on to talking about Maeve and why Maeve's blood oath felt so different than Aelin's blood oath with Rowan. Her relationship with Rowan is very different than Maeve's relationship with the cadre. And they explain it's because Aelin made the blood oath with Rowan with love in her heart, so its purpose wasn't control, and so she doesn't have the same level of control over Rowan. She has to put a lot of force behind her commands for them to hold Rowan to anything really firmly, because when she gave the blood oath to Rowan, she didn't give it with the intention of controlling him. She gave it with the intention of being kind of on a team together. And we learn a little bit more about Fenris again, and we're reminded that he really doesn't seem to love being bound up in the blood oath to Maeve, but there's no way for him to break it independently. Breaking the blood oath would kill Fenris, and it would kill any of them because it's such a strong and controlling bond. And Aelin goes on to say, anyway, with Maeve's fleet headed towards Elway and Morinth's armada right off the coast, I have no choice but to encounter them. So is Maeve going to join them? What is happening with Maeve's fleet? And Gabrielle says Maeve could be going to intercept it. To vanquish Morinth's fleet is proofs of her intention to assist you, and then play it into whatever agenda she has beyond that. That's Gabrielle's hypothesis about what they're doing, but they actually don't know. And Aelin is like, that sounds stupid. There would be too many losses to justify Maeve sending a whole armada worth of ships just as like a sign of her allegiance to me. And Rhys is like, honestly, she wouldn't care. She like doesn't seem to really care about losses. And Gabrielle's like, stop. And Aelin is like, are you supposed to retrieve the rings and keys from Lorcan or just kill him? And Gabrielle is like, if we answer, will you kill us? And Aelin says, depends on how good of allies you are. And Gavin says, Rolfe has weapons, or will be receiving them. They're called fire lances. Alchemists in the southern continent developed them for their own territory wars. More than that, we don't know, but the device can be wielded to one man to devastating effects. And then Aelin and Rowan leave. So we've got some information exchange. There's these like fire weapons that are coming to Rolfe, which it would be helpful for fighting the Valg, obviously, because the Valg can get burnt up. And then as Aelin and Rowan are walking home, this is the conversation that is had. There's no room for error, Aelin says. Rowan laid a hand on her shoulder. I know, we'll make it count. Her eyes burned. We're playing a game against two monarchs who have ruled and schemed longer than most kingdoms have existed. And, even for her, the odds outsmarting and outmaneuvering them. Seeing the cadre, how Maeve contains them. She came so close to separating us this spring. So close. Rowan traced his thumb over her mouth. Even if Maeve had kept me enslaved, I would have fought her. Every day, every hour, every breath. He kissed her softly and said onto her lips, I would have fought for the rest of my life to find a way to return to you again. I knew it the moment you emerged from the Valg's darkness and smiled at me through your flames. She swallowed the tightness in her throat and raised a brow. You were willing to do that before all of this. So few benefits back then. What I felt for you in Dorian and what I feel for you now are the same. I just didn't think I'd ever get the chance to act on it. They could burn the entire world to ash with it. He was hers, and she was his, and they had found each other across centuries of bloodshed and loss, across oceans and kingdoms and wars. They go back to their room, but they don't have time to get up to any hanky-panky because they have to sleep. They have to like sleep for a couple minutes. That is the more pressing priority. In the other room, we have Lysandra and Aedion, and Dorian is like on a cot in the corner. And Aedion can't sleep because he's thinking about going to meet his father and like what that might look like. And then Lysandra stumbles from her bed naked. She's like, it's too hot for clothes. She's just running around the room naked. And I mean, she did work in a brothel, so I think her nakedness is like. And she also like shapeshifts into animals all the time, so I think she's just like less impressed with her own nakedness. But anyway, she does seem like a little like out of it. And then she like kind of collapses onto Aedion and she passes out into one of those magic induced sleeps. In the morning, Lysandra wakes up. She's now clothed. And she's appalled to see what Aedion is planning to wear to meet his father. He's just like wearing his same traveling clothes. And so she barges into Aedion in Rowan's room, and Aelin yells at her to get out, and she steals some of Rowan's clothes for Aedion to wear. And it's just like a cute little moment. Cute and silly. So he's got a better outfit on. And they are meeting with Gabrielle in Rolfe's tavern, and Aedion didn't warn Gabrielle that he was planning on coming because he didn't want him to have time to like prepare speeches. He wanted to kind of like spring this on him. And Gabrielle turns to Aedion as soon as he walks in and he says, you look so much like her, meaning Aedion's mother. Aedion says, she died so your queen wouldn't get her claws on me. And we come to learn that like Aedion's mother died from this disease or like illness or something that could have been cured by the Fae, but she refused to go into Fae territory for fear that they would find out about Aedion, and then Aedion would be captured by Maeve. And he goes on to say, she was 23 years old, she never married, and her family shunned her. She refused to tell anyone who sired me, and they took their disdain, their humiliation, without an ounce of self-pity. She did it because she loved me, not you. And he suddenly wished he'd asked Aelin to come, so he could tell her to burn this warrior into ashes, like that commander in Ilium. Because looking at his face, he hated him. He hated him for the 23-year-old his mother had been, younger than he was now when she had died, alone and sorrowful. Aedion growled, if your bitch of a queen tries to take me, I'll slit her throat. If she hurts my family any more than she already has, I'll slit yours too. His father rasped, Aedion. I want nothing from you, Aedion continued, unless you plan to help us, in which case I will not object to the assistance, but beyond that, I want nothing from you. I'm sorry, his father said, those lion's eyes full of such grief. Aedion wondered if he'd just struck a male already down. I'm not the one you need to apologize to, he said, turning towards the door. His father's chair scraped against the floor. Aedion kept walking, Lysandra falling into place beside him. Please, his father said as Aedion's hand clamped down on the handle. Go to hell, Aedion said, and left. And he goes down, he just like storms out, Lysandra like following him, and he goes down to the beach and he just like sits down on the coast, and they like sit there in silence for a while, and then he finally says, I didn't expect to say any of that. And Lysandra says to him, maybe it's good that you spoke from your heart. And Aedion goes, we need them to work with us. I might have made an enemy of him. And Lysandra is like, no, you didn't, Aedion. Trust me, if you had told him to crawl over hot coals, he would have. Like, that man wants to earn your trust and your respect. And Aedion says, he'll realize soon enough exactly I am, and perhaps he will not be so desperate. Oh, this like breaks my heart. Aedion like really feels like he's not valuable. A lot of these characters really have like not been seen as valuable in society. And Lysandra responds to this because this breaks her heart too. And she says, who exactly do you think you are? Ardelayne's whore? Is that what you still think of yourself? The general who held his kingdom together, who saved his people when they were forgotten, even by their own queen. That's the man I know. And if he starts pointing fingers, I'll remind him that he served that bitch in Dorian for centuries without question. And then Lysandra goes on to continue. You say the word and I'll transform into a creature out of their nightmares. I have been working on something new. Lysandra has a new creature that she's been working on. That's a big, fun, scary one that she can pull out if anyone causes Aedion trouble. Meanwhile, back at the tavern, Aelin and Rowan show up, and Rolfe is also there, and they're like sitting at a table chit-chatting. Rolfe is annoyed she's back. He just like cannot seem to get rid of Aelin Galathynius. But she's like, I came to see if you changed your mind about my alliance. And Rolfe is like, there's like literally nothing new. What do you want? But then she looks down and she sees that there's like a map in front of them, and there are silver figurines camped across the middle of the continent, an impenetrable line from the Farian Gap to the mouth of the Avery. Additional figures in the Gulf of Oreo, and in Melisande and Fenhero, and near Elway's border. It's the latest report Rolfe draws of the locations of Morant's armies. They have moved into position. Aid to the north is now impossible, and they stand poised to strike Elway. And Aelin is like, Elway has no standing army. Like, what are they planning to attack? Like, they're not a military power. She also realizes how quickly they had moved. Rolfe, like, giving comments on it. They moved, like, just, like, unfathomably fast, moving in a whole army across the whole continent in 3 weeks, immediately after Aelin's stand in Ilium. And Fenris is like, it doesn't make sense that they attack Elway. Like, it's not a strategic move. And Aelin is like, it's a message for me. She unfurled her fist, gazing at the scar there. The scar from the vow she made to Nehemia. And Rowan says, we have personal ties to Elway. He knows that place matters to her. And Fenris says, Erwin now holds everything south of the Avery. And Aelin's looking at the map, and she looks to the west, to the vast expanse of the waste spreading out behind the mountainous continental divide. And her gaze snagged on a small name along the western coast, Briarcliff. Considering the life debt owed to her, her gaze dragged down south to the Red Desert, where another mini life debt waited for her to claim them. She turns to Rolfe and is like, you are going to give me your armada, you are going to arm it with those fire lances I know you've ordered, and you will ship any extras to the Mysian fleet when they arrive. And Rolfe is like, LOL, nothing has changed. Why are you thinking that I'm helping you now? You are heir of the Mycenian people, Aelin says. I have come to claim the debt you owe my bloodline on that account too. That is why everything around here is named the Sea Dragon. And Rolfe is like, the Mysians are gone. And Aelin is like, I don't think so. I think they have been hiding here in the Dead Islands for a long, long time. And you somehow managed to claw your way back into power. And I have liberated Ilium from Ardelayne. I took back the city, your ancient home, for you. It's the Mysians. It's yours if you dare to claim your people's inheritance. And then Aelin lets her magic come to the surface. And she like glows all golden. And she like lets this tendril like spiral out into the whole of Skulls Bay. And it's just like a little display of power. Aedion and Lysandra show up like a few minutes later, having felt Aelin's magic, and then Dorian does the same thing too, like 10 minutes later, the magic having called all of them to this place. And they like start brainstorming, they're talking, they're chatting about all of this. Rolfe is still being like, no, I'm not going to give you my fleets, I'm not going to send the armada forward. And then at 11 o'clock, exactly on the dot, Aelin stands up mid-sentence, like Fenris is in the middle of talking, and she says, thank you so much for your hospitality. And Rolfe is like, that's it? And Aelin says, yes, if you will not give me an armada. If you will not unite what is left of the Mysians and return to Terrasen, then I'll find someone else who will. And Rolfe says, there is no one else. And Aelin says, you said I would once pay for my arrogance, and I did many times. But Sam and I took on your entire city and fleet, and it destroyed it. All for 200 lives you deem less than human. So perhaps I've been underestimating myself. Perhaps I do not need you after all. She turned again, and Rolfe sneered. Did Sam die still pining after you? Or did you finally stop treating him like filth? Do not talk about Sam. Don't do it. Because guess what? Rowan immediately is choking the life out of Rolfe. Because we do not talk about Aelin's beloved dead. The captain pressed onto the map Rowan's snarling teeth close to ripping off his ear. XOXO. That's a little treat for us. And Fenris smirked. I told you to watch your words carefully, Rolfe. But as Aelin is about to leave, black starts to like seep in like ink covering the magic map. And we come to realize that the Valg are here. And Aelin is like, we leave now. And Dorian says, if the forces get here, the people, Aelin is like, we will not let them reach the town. And Aelin's like, Aedion is like, go to the boats tethered to the shore. You would have expected someone noticing a shark pulling it. Like, they have a little boat for them to jump in and get out of here. Lysandra turned into a shark last night and pulled it to the shore. Cute. And Rolfe is like, you put out the magic and summoned them here, Aelin. And Aelin is like, it wasn't me. Why would I waste my magic on summoning them? I'd probably summon the Myceans or maybe some allies instead of the Valg. Anyway, we're leaving. You made it clear we aren't allies and this isn't my fight. So I'm taking all the blondies with me since the Fae boys are my allies now. Adios. And Rolfe is like, you abandoning me isn't going to convince me to help you. And Aelin is like, I literally told you I do not need you. And Rolfe goes, and what of your idealism? What of that child who stole 200 slaves from me? You'd leave the people of this island to perish? Yes, she said simply. I told you, Rolfe, that Endover taught me some things. Rolfe swore. Do you think Sam would stand for this? Sam is dead, she said, because men like you and Arobynn have power. But Arobyn's reign is over now. She smiled at the darkening horizons. Seems like yours might end rather soon as well. You bitch. She says, don't use Sam as a weapon against me. Sam would literally hate you. Sam hates you and he would love me. So, get out of town. Just then a messenger pops in and is like, hey, we're in trouble. There are 8 warships filled with Valg soldiers. And they're flanked by 2 sea wyverns. So, what should we do? And Rolfe is like, did you summon them? He asks again. And Aelin is like, no. Why would I do that? And then Rolfe turns to her and he says, I want to be admiral. I want this entire archipelago. I want Ilium. And when this war is over, I want Lord in front of my name as it was before my ancestors long ago. What of my payment? Aelin surveyed him in turn, the entire room deathly quiet, compared to the chaos of outside. For every Morinth ship you sack, you can keep whatever gold and treasure is aboard it, but weapons and ammunition go to the front. I'll give you land, but no royal titles beyond those of Lord of Ilium and King of the Archipelago. If you bear any offspring, I will recognize them as your heirs, as I would any children Dorian might bear. You send those bastards down to the inky black, and my fleet is yours. I cannot guarantee the Myceans will rise, though. We've been scattered for too far and too long. Only a small number live here, and they will not stir without proper motivation. He glanced towards the bar as if he expected to see someone behind it. But Aelin held out her hand, smiling faintly. Leave that to me, he hissed, pulling back his hand, and Aelin grinned. Welcome to Her Majesty's army, Privateer Rolfe. She gestured towards the open door. Shall we? Aelin was insane. Dorian realized. Brilliant and wicked, but insane. And perhaps the greatest, most unremorseful liar he had ever encountered. He'd felt her summon sweep through the world, felt fire hum against his skin. There was no mistaking who it belonged to. This war would not be won on smiles and manners. It would be won by a woman willing to gamble with an entire island full of people to get what she needed to save them all. A woman whose friends were equally willing to play along, to rip their souls to shreds if it meant saving the greater population. They knew the weight of the lives panicking around them if they gambled wrong. Aelin, perhaps more than anyone. Dorian has got a good grasp on this girlie. He's like, wow. So Aelin starts giving instructions. Rowan, Lysandra, Fenris, Gabriel, and Aelin are on Rolfe's ship, and they are planning to sail into the heart of the enemy ships. Aedion is on the northern watchtower. He is manning this mounted harpoon. If any ship gets too close to the chain, the shipbreaker, you blast a hole in their side. That's his job. Dorian is not going to the heart of the battle, but instead is stationed at the southern watchtower to be a last defense, also at the chain, to do a similar thing with his magic. She was a liar and a murderer and a thief, and Aelin had a feeling she'd be called much worse by the end of this war. But as that unnatural darkness gathered on the horizon, she wondered if she might have bitten off more than she and all her fanged friends could chew. She did not give her fear an inch of space. She did not let anything but black fire ripple through her. Securing this alliance was only part of it. The other part, the bigger part, was the message, not to Morinth, but to the world, to any potential allies watching this continent, contemplating if it was indeed a lost cause. Today, her message would thunder across the realms. She was not a rebel princess, shattering enemy castles and killing kings. She was a force of nature. She was a calamity and a commander of immortal warriors of legend. And if those allies did not join with her, she wanted them to think of today, of what she would do, and wonder if they might find her on their shores, in their harbors one day too. They had not come 10 years ago. She wanted them to know she had not forgotten it. sorry, these chapters are so good. The Skull Space chapters, can we just take a second to like admire how good these chapters are? Okay, so they get onto Rolfe's ship, and Rolfe has, and Aelin requested that Rolfe bring these iron chains onto the ship so she'd have something to like anchor herself against, so she doesn't like lose track of her magic. She doesn't like lose herself to her magic, and she just like has something to like anchor her to like the present. And then Aelin turns to Lysandra and she says, "Good hunting." And then Lysandra pops off the boat and transforms into a sea dragon. That's right, a sea dragon. The symbol of the Mycenaeans. The Mycenaeans would not be back until the sea dragons returned, and guess who's back? The sea dragon. Lysandra dove and she let them see the long, powerful body that broke the surface bit by bit as she plunged down, jade scales gleaming like jewels in the blinding midday sun. See the legend straight from the prophecies. The Mycenaeans would only return when the sea dragons did, so Aelin had ensured that one appeared right in their god's damned harbor. And then we learned that one of the reasons, besides like Brandon's sign for her to go there, to go to that temple in Ilium, was so Lysandra could see the life-size carvings of the sea dragons that were there, because that was like the Mycenaeans' home. And Aedion thinks to himself, oh, the two of them, those crafty, scheming devils, a queen of legends indeed. It was hard not to look back as they passed over the submerged chain, and then Shipbreaker began to rise from the water, sealing them out of the bay, where Rolfe's other ships would wait safely behind the chains line, to guard the town, now silently watching them. If all went well, they would only need this boat, she told Rolfe, and if it went badly, then his ships wouldn't make any difference anyway. And then Rowan uses his wind to push them out to sea, and Lysandra's gone. She's like somewhere in the water, swimming around in her sea dragon form. And Rolfe's like, okay, what's the plan? And Aelin is like, we draw them in as close as we can, and when you see the whites of their eyes, you shout at us. And Rowan turns to Aelin, and his fingers slid to cup her jaw, his thumb brushing against her cheek. We draw at our power, slow and steady. And she goes, I know. He angled his head, brows lifting, a half-smile curved to sinful mouth. You've been spiraling down into your power for days now, haven't you? She nodded. It was hard not to look back as they passed over the submerged chain, and then Shipbreaker began to rise from the water, sealing them out of the bay, where Rolfe's other ships would wait safely behind the chains line, to guard the town, now silently watching them. If all went well, they would only need this boat, she told Rolfe, and if it went badly, then his ships wouldn't make any difference anyway. And then Rowan uses his wind to push them out to sea, and Lysandra's gone. She's like somewhere in the water, swimming around in her sea dragon form. And Rolfe's like, okay, what's the plan? And Aelin is like, we draw them in as close as we can, and when you see the whites of their eyes, you shout at us. And Rowan turns to Aelin, and his fingers slid to cup her jaw, his thumb brushing against her cheek. We draw at our power, slow and steady. And she goes, I know. He angled his head, brows lifting, a half-smile curved to sinful mouth. You've been spiraling down into your power for days now, haven't you? She nodded. It had taken most of her focus, had been such an effort to stay in the present, to stay active and aware while she was burrowing down and down, drawing up as much of her power as she could without attracting any notice. I didn't want to take any chances, not if you were drained from saving Dorian. I don't know why this scene like really gets me, but the face cupping and like slow and steady, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, Rowan. I think Rowan is like such a great guy. He's like such the perfect guy for Aelin, but like normally, like I don't feel like I have like a big crush on Rowan, but in this moment I was like, oh. Anyway, and then Aelin slices her palm and Rowan slices his, and they share their magic. They're like Karanam, right? They're like unite their magic into one force. During the time she'd trained with Rowan and Wendelin, her power's limit had been self-imposed, and then that day with the Valg, she'd broken through it, had discovered an entire hidden level beneath it. She had drawn from it when she had circled the Doranel with her power, had taken a whole day to tunnel that far, to draw up what she needed. Aelin had begun this descent 3 days ago. She'd expected it to stop after the first day, to hit that bottom she'd sensed once before. She had not. And now with Rowan's power joining hers, Rowan's arm still held her tightly against him, as she had the distant, murky sensation of his coat scratching lightly against her face, the scent of him washing over her, soothing her. She was a stone plunked into the sea of her power, their power, down and down and down and down. There was the bottom, the ash-lined bottom, the pit of a dormant crater. Only the feeling of her own feet against the wood deck kept her from sinking into that ash, learning what might slumber beneath it. Her magic whispered to start digging through that ash and silt, but Rowan's grip tightened on her waist. Easy, he murmured in her ear. Easy. Still, more of his power flowed into her, wind and ice churning with her power, eddying into a maelstrom. And like a feral beast's freed of its leash, her magic erupted. Okay, so we've got it close enough. We can see the whites of their eyes. Her magic erupts out of her. There's this huge pillar of flame that is just like expanding, and it is laced with like these blue flames from Rowan's magic, and it is just like encircling everything. It is crazy. It is on display for the people watching them on the islands. For the world to know she was no mere princess playing with pretty embers. Like, girlie is a force to be reckoned with. Rowan is very worried that she went so deep into her magic, and he tries to like tug on the bond between them, like through their blood link, but she's not there. And he realizes very quickly that she's wearing the word key and has somehow also tapped into the word key's magic. And she like rips away the last of Rowan's power. She's actually like, oh, thank you, goodbye, and disconnects them. And then there's this big boom, and Rowan thinks it's thunder and then realizes it's the sound of a door slamming open. Fenris and Gabrielle then start like bowing to her. It becomes very evident very quickly that she's not Aelin anymore. Her face turned expressionless, cold as the gaps between the stars, and her eyes, turquoise, burned around a core of bright silver. No hint of gold to be found. That's not Aelin, Fenris breathed. A faint smile blossomed on her full mouth, born of cruelty and arrogance, and she examined the iron chain wrapped around her wrist. The iron melted away, molten ore sizzling through the wooden deck and onto the dark below. The creature that stared out through Aelin's eyes furled her fingers into a fist. Light leaked through her clenched fingers. Cold, white light. Tendrils flickered. Silver flame. Deanna, Rowan whispered. She flicked her eyes to him in question and confirmation, and she said to him in a voice that was deep and hollow, young and old, every key has its lock. Tell the queen who was promised to retrieve it soon, for all the allies in the world shall make no difference as she does not wield the lock, if she does not put those keys back in it. Tell her flame and iron, together bound, merge into silver to learn what must be found. A mere step is all it shall take. And then she looked away again. And Rowan realized what the power in her hand was. Realized that the flame she would unleash would be so cold it would burn. Realized it was the cold of the stars, cold of stolen light, but not of wild light, of moon fire. Okay, let's do a quick refresher. So Aelin has been taken over by Deanna. So we have like kind of like three main goddesses that Aelin's people believe in. So we've got Mala, who is the Lightbringer, Firebringer, who is like her connection like through Brandon and through the Galathynius side. And then we have Deanna and Mab, and there's like this, it's very confusing, and it's intentionally pretty confusing because Mab is Maeve's sister. So Mab and Maeve were both like these immortal princesses, but Mab gave away her immortality. She died, and Maeve like turned her into a goddess, and she was kind of like fused with Deanna, and they are the goddess of the moon, and they are connected to Aelin through the Ash River side. So she has Mala, sun goddess, and Deanna, moon goddess. And so moon goddess, keeper of the moon, is the one who is there. She's like exploding with this like moon fire that's like cold, it burns, and we get a riddle. Obviously, this is what everyone wants in this moment. Everyone is like, you know what I want? Well, the Valkyrie taking over, the world is about to end. I would love a little riddle. I actually think a little riddle would make this better. And so that's what Deanna provides. Great, thank you so much. Anyway, we're gonna zip zap zop right into Aelin's head. And Aelin has essentially lost complete control of her body. Like, complete control over them. And this is kind of what's happening in there. And those flames, her flames and her beloved's magic, they belong to the other now, the other being Deanna, to a goddess who had walked through a temporary gate hanging between her breasts, the word key, and seized her body as if it were a mask to wear. She had no words, for if she had no voice, no self, nothing, and she could only watch through a window, as she felt the goddess, who had perhaps not protected her, but hunted her for the entirety of her life, for at this moment, this opportunity, examine the dark fleet ahead. So easy to destroy it. The goddess, Deanna, feels the pull. So she has like, essentially like her moon fire pointed at the Valg, but then she feels the pull of more life behind her. She can like feel the people of Skulls Bay, and she turns and she goes to direct the flames at Skulls Bay, and a voice cries out, no. And Rowan jumps in front of the like flaming arrow of moon fire that Deanna has pointed at the city. And Aelin thinks to herself, a name clanged through her as he hurled himself onto the path of that fist, that moonfire, not just to save those innocents in the city, but to spare her soul from the agony if she destroyed them all. Rowan, and as his face became clear, his tattoos stark in the sun, as that fist full of unimaginable power now opened towards his heart, there was no force in the world that could keep her contained. And Aelin comes back to herself, like chucks Deanna out of her body. She says, we're not hurting Rowan. She tucks Deanna out of their body, is able to redirect the flames of ice and fire and moonlight towards the Valg forces instead. But it kind of like, because she wasn't in control, it like kind of explodes everywhere and everything. So that's kind of a bummer. Aelin comes too, and she's like, what the heck was that? She's in the water. The ship, Rolfe's ship, is like going down around them. A lot of the Valg ships are going around them. And Aelin's a little upset because there were a lot of men on that boat. Like, it wasn't just like her guys and Rolfe. Like, there was a crew that was like manning that boat. And she's worried that they're hurt as well. And she's like, maybe I just killed them. Also, maybe I killed Rolfe, the guy that I was trying to get an ally with. She's in the water. Fenris is right by her, and Fenris grabs her and like helps her to shore. And Aelin is just freaking out looking for Rowan. Also, she like, the last thing she can kind of remember is having her magic like pointed directly at Rowan and trying to pull it away. And she wants to make sure he's fine. And Fenris is like, he's okay, but we like need to swim to shore, my little friend. And they start swimming over to where Rowan is, and they're standing on this like bit of reef, I guess. So they're in the water, but they're only like knee deep. Lysandra pops up, and obviously she knows something went wrong because that was not the plan to like explode the whole village. And so she's like, hey guys, what's happening? But she's in sea dragon form, so she can't really have a chat with them. And she helps kind of gather Rolfe in the first minute. She like brings them to shore. She's like a little like boop, 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 boop. And then she goes to take care of the sea dragons who are currently snacking on a few of Rolfe's men in the water. And she starts breaking apart the remaining Valg ships with her tail. She's like doing double duty. So there's still some Valg ships that are standing. She's breaking them up with her tail. She's also going to go shoo off the sea dragon, or the sea wyverns that are eating up Rolfe's men. So she encounters the first sea wyvern. It's giant. It's double the size of Lysandra, and it's clearly like just built to destroy. Like, it has no purpose except destruction. But Lysandra is both faster and smarter, and she is like trying to trick them by diving and weaving through like sandbars and reefs. And she's about to chomp through and she like is able to like chomp through the neck of the first one, but kind of like twisting around and getting him a little tangled. But then she turns to go get the second one, and he has disappeared. And Lysandra realizes that he's headed straight for those shallow areas where everyone's standing, and she's worried that he's about to go like gobble Aelin up. So, but she's able to like run around, grab him, slam him into a ship, and kill it. But then Aelin is shouting at her to swim. And Lysandra, we come to learn, has killed 2 baby sea wyverns. Those were not the grown-ups. Those were the little babies. But now 3 adult sea wyverns are after her, and they're extra mad because she just murdered their babies. So they're in a really cranky mood now. And Aedion is watching, and he's obviously very worried because he knows that Lysandra can't like just leave. Lysandra can't be like, oh, this is actually too much for me to handle. I'm going to turn back into a mortal girl and we can all peace out, because she's so exhausted. He knows that the energy it would take her to shift, she doesn't have that remaining. She's over at the mouth of the bay by Dorian and Aedion, and Dorian is trying to get her to come over to him because he's hoping that he'll be able to help her with his magic. So, and like offer her some protection. But instead, she swims straight for the middle of the middle sea wyvern. There's like 3 of them. She swims straight for the middle sea wyvern. And Aedion thinks to himself, for the first time, he hated his cousin. He hated Aelin for asking this of Lysandra, both to defend them and to secure the Mysians to fight for Terrasen. Hated the people who had left such scars on the shifter that Lysandra was so willing to throw her life away. Hated himself for being stuck in this useless tower with a war machine only capable of firing 1 shot at a time. Remember, he has like the harpoon gun. Lysandra heads for those sea wyverns. She darts away at the last second and then heads for the warships. There are arrows shooting at her, and the water is becoming bloody because they keep hitting her and she's bleeding, and the blood is like drawing the wyverns in. Aedion is like wrecked because remember, he has a crush on Lysandra, and she's like bleeding out in the middle of the ocean as like giant monsters try to eat her up. But she leaps over this like warship in such a way that when the first sea wyvern tries to follow her, it impales itself on the boat, killing itself and also sinking the boat. Double whammy. But there are still 2 sea wyverns left to deal with, and so now she's heading for shore straight for Dorian. She gets close enough that Dorian is able to freeze one of the sea wyverns using his magic. She gets away, he freezes it, and then he has a catapult, and they use the catapult to conk it on the head once it's frozen. And while that is happening, Lysandra loses track of the 3rd sea wyvern, though. She doesn't know where it went. And she's panicking a little bit, but then Gabriel, who's been keeping an eye out, is like, it's on your left. So she's able to grab it again, or fight it again, and she tries luring the creature towards Dorian. She's like, honestly, that worked super well last time, so what if we could just do a repeat? But he's not tricked. We now know Dorian has ice magic, and so the sea wyvern will not get close enough where Dorian can get him. And we then see there's like these 2 smaller monsters that are passing the sea wyvern and are headed straight for Lysandra. And the monsters bite Lysandra. Aedion is again freaking out. She's bleeding literally everywhere now. And she leads the sea wyvern over towards the Valg soldiers who are still in the water. And the sea wyvern eats a bunch of them because he's like now kind of like stirred up into this blood frenzy. And so he's not thinking straight. He's just nomming. He's just gobbling. And then she quickly changes course and heads towards Aedion at the other side of the bay and towards the giant crossbolt thing. But she's slowing down because she's bleeding so much. And they're like, hurry, because if she can get under the chain, maybe she'll be safe. But she makes it to the bay, and Aedion's like, oh my gosh, she's so teeny itty bitty baby compared to the other sea wyverns. Like, one bite and she'll be like toast-a-roo. And Aedion uses his big giant, I have an arrow here. He has a harpoon gun. He has a harpoon gun, and he shoots it through the throat of the sea wyvern, and it kills it. It's bleeding black blood everywhere, all over the place. And as soon as that sea wyvern is dead, Aedion runs down to the beach where Lysandra is literally like bleeding out on the bay. She's like managed to like throw herself on the shore, and she's just like totally torn up and she's bleeding. And Aedion tries to approach her, but she's lylost like completely. Like Lysandra's not in there anymore. It's just Sea Dragon, and he knows that she'll be okay because as soon as Lysandra or as soon as Aelin or Rowan comes down there, they'll be able to heal her. But she also can't shift because she's exhausted. And she's closing her eyes, and Aedion is like, hey, no eye closing. Don't go through all that to die right here on the beach. Keep those eyes open, girly pop. And then he says to her, the useless sentries in the watchtower are all half in love with you. He lied. One said he wanted to marry you. A low snarl. He yielded a foot but held eye contact with her as he grinned. But you know what I told them? I said they didn't stand a chance in hell. Aedion lowered his voice, holding her pained, exhausted stare. Because I am going to marry you, he promised. One day, I am going to marry you. I'll be generous and let you pick when, even if it's 10 years from now, or 20. But one day, you are going to be my wife. Those eyes narrowed in what he could only call female outrage and exasperation. He shrugged. Princess Lysandra Ash River sounds nice, doesn't it? And then the dragon huffed in amusement. Exhaustion, but amusement. And Aelin and Rowan are down on the beach now, and Aelin is healing her while apologizing. She's like, sorry that went so south. We like did not realize. And everyone is so impressed with Lysandra. Like, Aedion might have been kidding about everyone wanting to marry her, but like they are so impressed. That was the coolest thing anyone has ever seen ever in their whole lives. And Aedion is like, what the heck happened out there? And Aelin is like, I lost control. And her hand like drifts basically to the word key, and Aedion understands like a little bit what might be happening. And Aedion is like, we can't carry her. She's like too big to carry her into shore, and she's like too weak to shift. And Aelin is like, okay, then we will stay out here until she's better. Like Rolfe, she like needs to talk with Rolfe and everything. And Aedion is like, I will stay here. You go deal with Rolfe and all that stuff. And it winds up being like hours before Lysandra is able to come back to her body. And Aedion and his father waited in silence for her as the night fell. Gabriel like sits pretty far away, but like on the shore in case, you know, something were to happen. The lion remained out of sight and held in the offer of help. Held in the words he needed to say. Okay, so this is from Gabriel's perspective, what is happening right now. Gabriel transforms into a mountain lion, so sometimes he goes by the lion. Held in the words he needed to say to the wolf, who had downed a sea wyvern with one arrow, 24 years old, and already a myth whispered over campfires. Today's events would no doubt be told around fires in lands even the lion had not roamed in all his centuries. The lion watched the wolf vanish into the trees, heading for the town at the end of the sandy road, the shifter unconscious in his arms, and the lion wondered if he himself would ever be mentioned in those whispered stories, if his son would ever allow the world to know who had sired him, or even care. I love this so much because when we were first talking about the cadre with Aedion, like back in, I think, Queen of Shadows, when Aelin returns to Rifthold, when he hears the story of Rowan, he's like, oh my gosh, he's like in awe. This is like the men of Maeve's cadre are like famous. They're the stories they whisper around campfires. And now for Aedion to be only 24 and already kind of taking part in these stories that he admired so profoundly, and his father like recognizing that, even if Aedion himself is like being a little cranky pants McGee about his dad, he's not really in dad mode yet. Totally okay, totally cool. I just think it's really sweet. I think it's really nice. So anyway, Lysandra has shifted back to person form, and he takes her inside. Meanwhile, Aelin and Rowan go to meet with Rolfe to kind of like debrief and figure out what next steps are, because obviously they are allied now. And Rolfe is like, hey, what happened out there with the whole you exploding my ship, transforming into a goddess situation? And Aelin is like, when you are blessed by Mala, sometimes you find that your control can slip. And Rolfe is like, slip? It did seem like you were going to literally explode my entire town for like a second there. You like were like ready to go. And Rowan cuts in and he says, magic is a living thing. When you are that deep in it, remembering yourself, your purpose is an effort. That my queen did so before it was too late is a feat in itself. And Rolfe says to her, "It looks to me like you were a little girl playing with power too big for you to handle, and only your prince jumping in your path made you decide not to slaughter my innocent people." And Aelin says, "It looks to me like the pirate lord of Skulls Bay and long-lost Mycenaean heir has just allied with a young queen so powerful she can decimate cities if she wishes. It looks to me like you have made yourself untouchable with that alliance, and any fool who seeks to harm you, to usurp you, will have me to contend with. So I suggest you salvage what you can of your precious ship, mourn the dozen men I take full responsibility for losing, and whose families I will compensate accordingly, and shut your rutting mouth." I think this is an important moment because at once Aelin can't like fully accept the weight of the responsibility with Rolfe. Like, she can't be like, "Yeah, my bad, that was crazy," because obviously she needs to like build trust with him. Like, that is crucial to what she needs to be doing. But I also like that she is taking some responsibility here for the men that she killed on accident. And you know that she feels, although she's not expressing it in this moment, you know that she feels a deep responsibility for that Aelin has never taken like the human cost of this war lightly. And then Rolfe turns to her and says, do you know what this map cost me?" And he tells the story of how he got the map. So he was a poor young boy. He was only 16 years old with like literally nothing to his name. Like, he was like, his whole family was impoverished. He didn't have anything. And he was on this crew that became shipwrecked, and everyone died except him. And he comes across this strange man, this man that like clearly has like magic powers, giving off genie vibes. And Rolfe says, and the man asks him, "What would you want? Like, if I could grant you one wish, what would you want?" And Rolfe says to be the pirate lord of Skulls Bay. And the guy's like, "Okay, I can do that for you, but I will take what you value most in this world." And Rolfe at the time was like, "I don't have anything. I'm a poor 16-year-old. I don't have anything. Take whatever you want from me. There's nothing I value at this moment. There's nothing of value that I have at this moment." And so he says, like, "Deal. Sounds great." And he wakes up back on Skulls Bay with the map printed on his arm. And he goes home and he learns that his mother and sister had gone out on a little boat to go look for him when he was shipwrecked. And the boat returned, but his mother and sister had not. "That was the price of my power. What shall yours be, Aelin Galathynius?" And I think this is a really important reminder that having this much power always comes with a price. And like, Aelin has seen a little bit of this price, but like the full extent of the price that Aelin will have to pay is obviously not done because this war is not over. And so now her and Rowan are out alone on the beach. They've left Rolfe. They're going back to a beach, a different beach than Lysandra. And I'm gonna be honest with you, this is a little weird too that they don't like check back in with Lysandra before they go and do this activity. But Lysandra is truly fine, and maybe they were like aware of that. Anyway, and Rowan, they're just like chatting, debriefing. They like needed a second to like be like, okay, what did go down out there? And Rowan says to Aelin, "Did you use that key willingly?" And Aelin is like, "No, I don't know what happened. Like, she just like showed up." Then she says to Rowan, "How could you put yourself in front of me like that?" Like, she's mad at him because he put himself directly in harm's way at her hand. And Rowan says, "If you had destroyed that city, it would have destroyed you and any hope at an alliance." And Aelin says, "If I had killed you, I thought I'd found the bottom of my power. I thought what I found in Wendelin was the bottom. I had no idea that was all just an antechamber." And she can like already feel her magic bubbling over again. Like, her magic has already built back up to the point where she's gonna need to like off gas some magic. And she knows that like that shouldn't be happening. Like, how much magic does she truly have? She still truly like doesn't have a full idea of the like depth of her magic. And then she says, "She stole me. She took me. I could feel her consciousness. It was like she was a spider waiting in a web for decades, knowing I'd one day be strong and stupid enough to use my magic and the key together. I might as well have rung the dinner bell." Her fire burned hotter, brighter, and she let it build and rise and flicker. A wry, bitter smile. "It seems she wants us to make finding this lock a priority, if you were given the message twice. Indeed, isn't it enough to contend with Erwan and Maeve, to do the bidding of Brannon and Elena? Now I have to face the gods breathing down my neck about it as well?" Perhaps it was a warning. Perhaps Deanna wished to show you how a not-so-friendly god might use you if you're not careful. She enjoyed every rutting second of it. She wanted to see what my power might do, what she could do with my body, with the key. Her flames burned even hotter, shredding through her clothes until they were ash, until she was naked and clothed only in her fire. And what she called me, the queen who was promised. Promised when? To whom? To do what? I'd never heard that phrase in my life, not even before Terrasen fell. And then Rowan says to her, this new depth of your power, Aelin, changes nothing. What Deanna did changes nothing. You are still young, your power is still growing. And if this new well of power gives us even the slightest advantage against Erewhon, then thank the Redding darkness for it. But you and I will learn to manage your power together. You do not face this alone. You do not decide that you are unlovable because you have powers that can save and destroy. If you start to resent that power, he shook his head. I do not think we will win this war if you start down that road. And Aelin says, sometimes I wish I wasn't the one who had to fight this war. And Rowan says, but who would be able to get under Erewhon's skin? Never underestimate that power of that insufferable swagger. Ah, I love that moment too, because I think it's so telling that Rowan isn't like, yeah, but you're the one with like all the power. He kind of appeals to a part of Aelin that is not connected to this like huge amount of power. He like connects it to something that is like innately like Aelin as like a person, as a human, not as this like powerful, almost like creature that she's becoming. And Aelin says, that swagger is what won over your cranky immortal heart. And then Aelin says, I love you. I am in love with you, Rowan. I have been for a while, and I know that there are limits to what you can give me, and I know you might need time. His lips crushed into hers, and he said into her mouth, dropping words more precious than rubies and emeralds and sapphires into her heart, her soul. I love you. There is no limit to what I can give you, no time I need. Even when this world is a forgotten whisper of dust between the stars, I will love you. Aelin didn't know when she started crying, when her body began shaking with the force of it. She had never said such words to anyone. Never let herself be vulnerable. Never felt this burning, unending thing, so consuming she might die from the force of it. And Rowan puts up a little shield around them. And they do the hanky-panky on the beach. They've been like waiting. They've been waiting this whole time. They've been like, there's always people around, or like, we have to save the world. But they like make a little beach bubble and they take some time for themselves. You are mine, Rowan breathed, and she felt the claiming in her bones, her soul. I am yours, she answered, and you love me. Such hope and quiet joy in his eyes, beneath all that fierceness, to whatever end. They're done, they head up to Aedion's room. Everyone's waiting there, and Rowan is a little feral. He goes a little feral. He's like in a little bit of like animalistic mode instead of like human person mode. That's just kind of like how fae men go in SJM books. They go a little weird when they first like claim their ladies. I didn't read them, okay? They come back and Lysandra immediately is like, enjoy your ride. And Aedion is just like staring down Dorian and he's like, don't say anything, don't say anything, don't say anything. With his eyeball combo. But Dorian doesn't say anything because he's a smart boy. And Aelin says in response, isn't that all these fae males are good for? And then Aelin pulls out the amulet of Orinth and explains that it's a word key and passes the Eye of Elena to Dorian. And she's like, okay, we're gonna need to do some magic powers stuff right now. And Aelin explains to Dorian like the whole thing. So far, like Dorian keeps getting little bits. He didn't know about the word key kind of element of this, and so he's finally being told about like the word keys. He's being like fully included in the whole thing. Because remember, he was like on the outs, because he was like until really recently part of like the Kingdom of Rifthold, who was her enemy. And now he is still the King of Rifthold, but he's not her enemy. They're BFFs. And then they start making blood word marks on the floor, and Dorian's like, hey, those books are from my library. And he's like, how did she even get those out of there? And he doesn't ask, but she stole them, obviously. And Queen Elena arrives. They like summon Queen Elena, and she's like very like foggy. Like they can't really see her. She's like very transparent. And she goes, it's too far. And Aelin is like, well, Rifthold isn't exactly available right now, and your tomb is trash, so tough luck. This is what we've got, okay? And she continues, no more games, no more half-truths. Why did Deanna arrive today? I get it, finding the lock is important, but what is it? And tell me what she meant by calling me the queen who was promised. And this is Dorian seeing Queen Elena for the first time, and he thinks to himself, she was exquisite, her face young and grave, her hair long and silvery white, like Manon's. Of course Dorian's going to think about Manon, because Dorian has one single thought process, and it is focused at the girl he has a crush on. And currently, that girl is Manon. In her eyes, startlingly, dazzlingly blue. They were now fixed on him. The pale gown she wore fluttering on a phantom breeze. Rise, young king. Silly goose. And then Aelin says, can we not play the holier than thou ancient spirit game? And Queen Elena says, I do not have much time. This connection is too hard to maintain so far from Rifthold. And Aelin is like, what a surprise, because they literally always say that. And she says, and Queen Elena says, Deanna is a god. She does not have rules and morals and codes the way we do. Time does not exist for her the way it does for us. You let your magic touch the key. The key opened a door, and Deanna happened to be watching at that exact moment. That she spoke to you at all as a gift, that you managed to shove her out before she was ready. She will not forgive that insult soon, Majesty. And Aelin says, she can get in line. Okay. And then Queen Elena explains the lock. There was once a great city in the heart of the marshes, Elena breathed. It is now half drowned on the plain. In a temple at its center, we laid the remnants of the lock. My father attained the lock at a terrible cost. The cost of my mother's body, her mortal life. A lock for the word keys, to seal shut the gate and bind the keys inside them forever. I did not understand what it had been intended for. My father never told me about any of it until it was too late. All I knew was that the lock was only able to be used once, its powers capable of sealing anything we wished, so I stole it. I used it for myself, for my people. I have been paying for that crime since. And I was like, okay, that's fine, but like, we are busy. There's like a whole war thing happening. We can't just be running around like looking for locks and going on like quests and things, guys. Like, you need to give us all the facts in little bits so we can like stop doing all these little shenanigans. And Queen Elena is like, well, if both Brandon and Deanna mention the lock, it is clearly important. And Aelin is like, okay, well, I'm honestly not sure how much I trust Deanna anymore because she did take over my body and try to murder everyone at Skull's Bay. So like, should we consider her a trustworthy ally? And Queen Elena says, my mother died to forge that lock. Elena snapped, eyes blazing bright. She let go of her mortal body so she could forge that lock for my father. I was the one who broke the promise for how it was to be used. Aelin is like, who was your mother? BTW. And Queen Elena is like, obviously, Mala Lightbringer. Remember how Brandon is Mala's beloved? Yeah, because they were like married and had a kid, obviously. And then Queen Elena poofs away, disappears. And Dorian goes, is it truly possible for a god to become mortal like that? And Rowan says, I've never heard of such a thing, but Fae have given up their immortality to bind their lives to that of their mortal mates. It is certainly possible Mala found a way to do it. And Aelin says, it's not just possible. She did it. That pit of power I uncovered today, that was from Mala herself. Elena might be many things, but she wasn't lying about that. And Lysandra's like, okay, so what's the plan now? And Aelin says, we are going to the Stone Marshes to find the lock. Rolfe's armada will split in half to find the Mysians up north, and the other half will come with us to Elway. And Aedion's like, that's not enough boats to fight Morianth's forces in Elway. And Aelin's like, I'm not planning to like pick a fight. Like, that's not what we're doing. We're going to like go to this dumb lock, okay? And like hopefully shore things up for Elway. Hopefully they don't need to fight. They leave at dawn the next morning, and Rolfe gives them the approximate location of the lock, although it is clearly warded because he can't get a great read on it. He can like get a general sense of where it is in the Stone Marshes, but he can't get like an exact location. And they like sail away. Lysandra is in the water in some form, swimming around down there, and Rowan's flying in the sky. They've been at sea for 3 days when something weird in the sky is coming towards them. And it's a wyvern, and everyone's like ready to attack. And Dorian is like, don't shoot. I have a crush on that girl. Her hair looks like moonlight, and she saved me a couple times, and she's really pretty, so don't shoot her. And Aelin is like, fine, don't shoot her. And then Manon gets chucked. Manon, who clearly has been like bleeding for a while because Abraxas is like covered in her like blue blood, and she's like completely like passed out in the saddle. Abraxas just like kind of plunks her in the water, and Dorian goes in and grabs her. We actually don't know that yet, but that's what ends up happening. And that's the end of part one, is that the Blondie has been reunited with Miss Witchling, Manon, and they're together. Two Boys in a Boat has expanded. The Two Boys in a Boat universe has expanded to be everybody on a boat, and we're gonna have a really great time. This book is like incredibly boat heavy. That's, I think, another reason I like the new covers. I talked about this in the first video, but I really like the new covers because this is boat heavy. The old covers, which is what they actually possess, you don't get the water vibes, you don't get the pirate vibes. This is just a gray girly with fire. Thank you so much for watching. Part 2 will be out soon. We've got a whole other half. We're only like here in the book. This, can you see where the little yellow sticky note is? This is where we're at. I will talk to you in the next one.